Hello, and welcome back to the 14th installment in a series of videos about the history of Japanese prints in the collection of Japanese works on paper at the Honolulu Museum of Art. I'm Stephen Salel, the curator of Japanese art. The subject of this video is the designer Utagawa Kunisada, who until recently has been largely misunderstood and dismissed from the history of Japanese woodblock printmaking. In the early 1990s, however, scholars published groundbreaking work on the artist that has helped to dramatically rehabilitate his public image. Born in Edo in 1786, Kunisada began to study painting around 1800 as an apprentice of Utagawa Toyokuni, who specialized in the portraits of kabuki actors. At the end of our recent discussion about Toshusai Sharaku, whose work we see on the left, we mentioned that Toyokuni emulated Sharaku's expressionistic style of portraiture. In the Okubie portrait by Toyokuni, shown on the right, we can see how the artist adopted several aspects of Sharaku's work, including the distinctive way of shaping his subject's hairline, eyes, nose, and mouth. Kunisada's earliest work dates to around 1807. From Toyokuni and Sharaku, he inherited not only the theme of kabuki actors, but an ostentatious sensibility. Although landscape prints, such as those by Katsushika Hokusai and Utagawa Hiroshige, enjoyed widespread popularity in the early 19th century, figurative prints did not entirely disappear. Instead, artists like Kunisada capitalized on the public's interest in landscapes by setting their own stories at such locations as the stations of the Tokaido Highway. This nocturnal scene, in which a long-haired female ghost finds the Buddhist patriarch Nichiren and his attendant sleeping along the side of the road, is set at Fukuroi Station. And as mentioned in our previous video, Kunisada produced a parody of the Tokaido series that Hiroshige published around 1833, reproducing each landscape with a surprising degree of fidelity and adding a beautiful woman somewhere in the foreground. The development of Kunisada's imagery can be divided into several distinct phases. Up until the 1830s, many of his prints emulated the work of other artists, even those from outside of Japan. Here is his depiction of a Buddhist temple in the style of a Dutch oil painting. As was common among artists in the Utagawa school, such as his teacher Toyokuni, Kunisada stretched his compositions across multiple sheets. The sheer size of these diptychs and triptychs exuded a sense of grandeur in keeping with the subject matter he explored at that time, the daily life of court nobles during the Heian period. By the early 1850s, he began depicting pivotal moments from kabuki theater performances. And again, his use of a diptych or triptych format further intensified the visual drama. Kunisada occasionally indulged in some of the fantastical imagery for which kabuki theater is known, such as this scene in which the villain Ishikawa Goemon is being boiled alive for his attempted assassination of Lord Toyotomi Hideyoshi. However, the scenes he selected were often far more restrained. In such cases, Kunisada captured the viewer's attention by meticulously rendering the actors and the stage set. Sometimes that environment is clearly defined, and in other cases, the composition is decorated in such a Baroque manner that it requires a viewer's intense concentration to make visual sense of it all. As his work further developed, Kunisada simplified the architectural space depicted in his prints, and we become keenly aware that his subjects are kabuki actors, because the environment is more clearly defined as a stage. Occasionally, the actors interact with props, including trapdoors. And while respecting the confines of the kabuki stage, the artist began to explore ways in which to increase the sense of pictorial depth in his prints. One dramatic example of his interest in complex architectural space is this hexaptic print from 1856, which offers a view of the entire kabuki theater behind the curtain. In the wings of the second floor, several actors gather around a stove and enjoy conversation. Before heading down to the first floor, to get assistance with their costumes, and head to the stage wings in preparation for their performance. In other prints from this time period produced in a more typical diptych or triptych format, Kunisada found simpler ways in which to expand or complicate the sense of pictorial space. Sometimes he used a physical barrier to separate characters from one another. The figures seem to be living in separate worlds, connected by a portal, such as a trapdoor, a fusama door, or a window. Our uncertainty about the degree to which these characters are aware of one another's close proximity adds an intriguing layer of drama to the scenario. Even when the figures are not hiding from one another, such as in this image of the erection of the new Ichimura Theater, the complex architectural space that Kunisada describes nevertheless creates an intense sense of disorientation, as well as the acrophobia that we felt in some of his works from the early 1850s. The narratives that underlie at least a few of these kabuki prints deserve attention as well. The kabuki play illustrated in these two works is based upon historical records of Tamagiku, a well-respected courtesan of the Nakamanjiya brothel in the Yoshiwara district, who died in 1726 at the age of 25. Details of the play have been largely forgotten, but a visual analysis of these prints, including the way in which Kunisada defines their pictorial space, offers some understanding about the story's plot. Our imaginations can fill in the gaps. The first print shows Tamagiku preparing to serve tea to her lover, Inaki Shinojo, who sits on the floor and chats with her. Through an open window, we can see Nakamanya Yahe, the proprietor of Tamagiku's brothel, eavesdropping on their conversation and learning about the couple's private plans. Is Tamagiku planning to leave the Yoshiwara and marry Inaki? The expression on Nakamanya's face makes it clear that he intends to stop her at all costs. The second print, depicting the play's climactic scene, reveals the tragic results of Nakamanya's meddling. The same three characters are shown in the same order, but their circumstances have changed dramatically. Again, the architecture of the scene offers vital information. On the right stands Tamagiku. In addition to the color of her kimono, we know by the mosquito netting that separates her from us and the other figures that she has died and returned from the grave as a spirit. In the center, Inaki holds a lit candle and gazes in dread at Tamagiku. On the left, Nakamanya hunches over a letter. Was he responsible for Tamagiku's death? And is he now desperately seeking a way to absolve himself? Another example of how Kunisada's division of a print's pictorial space works in combination with a narrative is his depiction of a scene from this kabuki play. Two characters in the play are the Buddhist priest Saigyo, a historical figure active in the late 12th century, and a courtesan named Eguchi no Kimi, who the priest mentions in his journal. Revealing the symbiosis between kabuki theater and Japanese woodblock prints, the play that Kunisada's image illustrates seems to have been inspired in turn by another print produced about 100 years earlier by Suzuki Harunobu, the subject of our 7th video. Speculation about the relationship between Saigyo and Eguchi no Kimi inspired explanations by authors, artists, and playwrights. A particularly popular tongue-in-cheek hypothesis was that Eguchi no Kimi was the manifestation of Bodhisattva Samantabhadra, known in Japanese as Fugen Bosatsu, and that the conversation that she and Saigyo reportedly had was an esoteric discussion about Buddhist theology. In classical Buddhist paintings, Bodhisattva Samantabhadra is easily identified by the white elephant upon which he rides, and so in Harunobu's design, Eguchi no Kimi likewise sits astride such an animal. To the right of the woman and her steed, Saigyo kneels in veneration. Although clearly inspired by Harunobu's image, Kunisada dramatically embellishes the composition of his own print. Eguchi no Kimi holds a long text from which she reads. Saigyo carries an incense burner, and both are dressed in sumptuous robes. In addition, two lion dance performers, characters in the kabuki play that further informs Kunisada's image, are shown in the left sheet of the triptych. In order to underscore the spiritual significance of Eguchi no Kimi and Saigyo, however, Kunisada envelops them in a cloud of incense, as if they were on a parallel but separate plane of existence from the dancers. In spite of the long period during which his artwork was overlooked, it is inspiring to know that Utagawa Kunisada has finally begun to receive the recognition that well-crafted, thought-provoking artworks such as this deserve. Beyond the comedy and theatrics that characterize many kabuki performances, we can appreciate in Kunisada's work his superb understanding of pictorial space, and his use of architectural structures to aid his storytelling. In our next video, we will discuss the prints of Utagawa Kuniyoshi. The artist's interest in tales of samurai and ghosts, and the surprising ways in which he challenged the gender norms of early 19th century Japan.